Hello, my name is Griffin Paulson, and my Patch Kucha is about disproportionate suspensions in our schools. I chose to talk about disproportionate suspensions because it hits home for me. My district had been taken over by the state for the last 2+ years due to an increased number of minority students getting suspended. I also feel like this topic can affect the houses and the homes of many of our students in our schools. Looking into school suspensions, data can show that the discrimination schools have on minority students. Minority students are, matter of fact, they're just getting suspended more than our white students. Looking at suspension rates, people can have many conflicting values as well as some gray areas. Are the suspensions coming from just the actions happening, or is the suspension coming from looking at what students perform the action? Some people may disagree with the data showing a higher percentage of minority students getting suspended, claiming they are only receiving the suspensions due to the actions that occurred and nothing about the color of their skin. I currently feel conflicted about this topic. On one hand, the data doesn't lie. We're suspending far more minority students compared to white students, but I also think that with my own practices and the practices of my colleagues and seeing the discipline that happens with them in my classrooms, it's based off the action and not the color of the person's skin. There are some different perspectives on the disproportionate suspensions. Some people think that the numbers are true and the data is there to back it up. They point to the reasons why minorities get suspended more often than white students. While on the other hand, people think that race should not be considered at all while analyzing data on suspensions. They believe we should be looking at the action that is taking place to receive the suspension. But perspective is always an important part in any ethical situation. My personal perspective comes from what I see in my classroom as a PE teacher and what I see in my school as well as my district. In my classroom, I would say my referrals are fairly evenly distributed between African Americans and white students. I don't write many referrals to start with, mostly of them coming from chronic tardies or skipping class or fighting, but the referrals I do write seem to be even. My perspective is also influenced by the state taking over my school due to the disproportionality. In the book So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijimio Olua, the author tries to educate her readers about how the conversation of race is an important one to have. She goes on to talk about white privilege, Black Lives Matter, all while pointing out how everything that has happened in our world has led to African Americans having to deal with hardships around every corner. In the Netflix documentary The 13th, it talks about the stages of racism we have faced from the white proclaimed end of slavery. It breaks down each step of the way and targets the school to prison pipeline multiple times, showing the viewers the increase in African Americans in jail as years have gone by. During this course, we have talked about the model code of ethics for teachers. I feel like this is something often talked about during our professional developments, but not always evaluated in our teaching. We as teachers need to make sure we are setting a good example for our students and modeling the proper things in both our words and our actions. In one of the articles I read about who gets suspended and why, a demographic analysis of schools and disciplinary infractions in a large school district, the researchers do a great job of explaining who has been getting suspended and for what reasons. The data shows that African American males and females were suspended 2 times as much for sexual harassment claims, threats, intimidation, disrespect, inappropriate behavior, and fighting. With an increase of suspensions, school districts need to look at how we can find a way to decrease those numbers for everyone. In the article, School Characteristics Related to the Use of Suspensions, researchers show that schools that use incentive programs to increase student achievement and positive relationships have seen a dramatic decrease in suspension, as opposed to schools that have not implemented a system like this. These systems have been created to focus on the heritage and the culture of the individuals in the school. In an attempt to look at ways to decrease suspensions, the article An Examination of Restorative Interventions in Racial Equity in Our School Suspensions, the research shows a drop in suspension numbers. It does not, however, show any change in the data for suspensions to minorities over white students. It saw the same discrepancies in the data when it came to referrals and in-school suspensions. PBIS is a system my school has implemented, and it seems to have been working in a positive way so far. In the article, The Impact of Positive Behavior Intervention Support on Suspensions by Race and Ethnicity in an Urban School District, the research shows that the system has worked in lowering the number of suspensions, but it has not changed the disparity among white and minority students. As I mentioned before, my district has dealt with the issue, and it had led the state to taking over. We have implemented PBIS, and after talking to some of the people who work in our district building, I can report that we are seeing the same results as the study just mentioned. Our suspensions are down, but the disparity among the minorities and the white students remain the same. Steps I can take to help face these disparities is to make sure I set a clear set of expectations in my classroom every term. This allows the students to understand what is expected of them, but also understand what the consequences will be if they cannot meet those expectations. My school district has been taking the necessary steps to clean up our issues with the topic. We have revamped our referral system, suspension criteria, and mediation strategies. The state has given us back control of our district due to the work we have been doing. We have seen steps in the right direction with what we have done. Now we need to keep up the good work and continue to educate ourselves on how to get better.